Hello, my friend. It's good to see you again. I have an amazing story for you today. Are you ready? Let's go watch it.
In this world, it's your connections and skills that decide everything for you. All my conscious life, I've believed in this idea. I thought that good skills and social circle led me to good success, but I didn't seem to have any skills or connections. As a result, no one wanted me. Why am I such a loser? Waking up on another day, before even opening his eyes, our hero finds himself in the middle of a medieval battle. There are hundreds of wounded people around him, explosions that make the ground shake, and columns of smoke up to the sky and rivers of blood. He looked around and saw a fierce battlefield. The screams of the men pierced his soul. It would be impossible to forget that scream. But the people's shouts were interrupted by a terrible rumbling noise that grew stronger by the second. When he looked up, he was horrified, for firestones the size of entire cities were falling from the sky. One of them fell within centimeters of him, crushing the man who lay at his feet, bleeding. All that was left of his battle buddy was a bloody stain on his cheek. The horrible smell of smoke was replaced with the smell of blood. The only thing that brought him to his senses was a shout from the commander. "Parsons, are you out of your mind? Are you measuring today or what?" Hearing the commander's call, he thought, "Is he addressing me? I'm not Parsons," the commander, handing him a huge two-handed axe. Parsons, slim in appearance, had enough strength in this little fellow to swing this axe like a feather. The battle was in full swing. There was no time to think. We had to act, and fast. The commander's face was covered with scars and blood. In rage, he shouted, "Come to your senses! Or have you decided to die here?" However, Parsons thought he was in a dream. He couldn't think that dreams could be so real. The Allied armies rushed to attack the impregnable fortress. But what kind of peace was that? Blinking, he was home again, standing in the doorway, covered in cold sweat. What the hell was that? When he went into his apartment, he saw that everything in the apartment was scattered. Things were lying on the floor, vases were broken, and a flower pot was upside down. It looked more like a crime scene than an apartment. Since our hero was unemployed, he lived with his father. For the father, his son was a real disappointment. While the sons of his friends already had their own homes and families, his son could not even find a regular job. I turned even my head, and my father said hello to him. Their family was so desperately poor that they couldn't afford to buy even ordinary t-shirts. Before he can even get into the room, his father says to him, "Let's hit my appliance and have dinner, although I think we should clean up a little bit." The son, feeling worthless, was ashamed every time he spoke to his father. When he talked to his father, with his eyes down to the floor, he answers him, "I agree, it's worth getting out." He completely structured his thoughts, all because he heard that the neighbor's son was earning 40 million won a month. I need a vacation. His father's constant antics of discontent had worn him down. His father couldn't see how hard he was trying to achieve anything. Same thing. My father worked in a factory all his life for pennies. He didn't even know those numbers before. As suddenly, in a dark and gloomy corner, sat a girl with a guilty look. Out of her soft lips came reluctantly, "Yes, that's right." Her eyes were tearful, and it was clear that 5 minutes ago she had been crying her eyes out. When she came to her senses, she said, "Remember something?" Hearing someone talking, the guy dropped the only plate he had intact. I wonder what she's saying. The guy was yelling at the whole apartment, "Stupid! Who scares people like that? Why are you hiding in the corner?" Raising her head, the girl looked at him hopefully. Min-soo and his father came. They're the ones who live in the neighborhood. Every time the neighbors came to see him, his father would just freak out. The guy comes up to her and asks her, "What did those two want? Did he at least leave his number?" The girl got up from the floor with the last of her strength. She didn't want to talk about what happened. Not wanting to say anything to her brother, she silently set about cleaning up picking up splinters from the floor. He was the only one who cared about her in any way. He couldn't let this situation go unaddressed. At the same time, his sister was the only person in the whole world who didn't think he was a loser. She said to him, "You don't want to be compared to a Minsu, do you? I guess I do. But we don't even have money to help you in any way." As he leaves, he says to his sister, "Stop worrying about me. I'm going to go to my room. I'll see if there are any other places I can hire." Minsu, if it wasn't for that idiot. Their family wouldn't be living like this. The guy decides not to dwell on it. It's time to start thinking about the good stuff. He needs to look for a job. When he saw his room, it was immediately clear that it hadn't been renovated for a long time. Let's get down to business. While looking for jobs, he had different thoughts. He was paying $1,000 to pay for his college. He couldn't even remember when he graduated, but he's still unemployed, and some high school student is earning 40 million won. It was already night outside, and he had been looking for a job for half a night. In desperation, he started shouting, "I would sell my soul to find a job." It was already night outside, and he had been looking for a job for half a night. In desperation, he started shouting, "I would sell my soul to find a job." The tired guy leaned against the back of the chair, sighing heavily, says, "Today is still better than yesterday." Remembering that he had been promised a call back, he decided to check his phone to see if there were any missed calls or messages. Checking his email, he saw that he had a couple of unread messages. Hopefully, he opens the first message, but there was nothing there. It was just a newsletter. Seeing this spam, he remembered how delicious ramen was at that cafe. Leafing through his mail further, he grew more and more frustrated. Suddenly, he comes across a job search site. When he decides to go to it, an incomprehensible video starts up in front of him. The guy was very confused by what he saw. There must be something wrong with this site. A huge sign popped up all over the screen. "Even with the cost of your life, do you want to find a job?" The guy's thinking, maybe this is a chance that can't be missed. A notification popped up. "Do you want to register on the site?" Without a second thought, the guy decides to do it. Before registering, you had to take a survey. The questions were quite interesting, for example. Do you have any hobbies that you spend about 20 hours a week on, including games? The questions became more and more interesting. If you suddenly got a large amount of money, what would you do? I wonder what they need this information for. This question made him think, and really what to choose. And then, there's the last question. What do you feel is the most important thing in your life? Since the most important person in his life was his sister, don't think he chose family. Through this survey, he was able to study himself like never before. He thought it was the last question, when suddenly another one came out of nowhere. In your opinion, are you a person of significance to the rest of us? As he read the question, he remembered how his whole life, from birth to now, no one wanted him. Realizing this made him depressed. Suddenly, a loading indicator appeared on the screen. You have answered all the questions, thank you. The processing of your data. I wonder if they were just questions, but he started to feel 10 times more confident. A couple minutes later, the data processing was complete. What was next for him? After the data loading was finished, some weird modeling loading started, as suddenly something starts happening all around. Teleportation to another world. His body began to glow, and gradually his arms and legs began to disappear somewhere. Was it really teleportation? Opening his eyes, he found himself back in his dream. But was it a dream? He froze like a stone in surprise. Everything around him was burning and smoking. When he looked around, he couldn't believe that he was back in the dream. He thought, when did I fall asleep? The last thing I remember is taking a survey on a job search site. Suddenly he hears a painfully familiar voice, shouting a familiar name, but it can't be that the dream is repeating itself. Let's get to know Parsons better. The gruff giant who sat in the corner drinking heavily was his father. The woman who was bedridden with a serious illness was his mother. The sweet and cheerful girl who held wheat in her hands was his sister. Parsons, like our hero, loved his family very much. That's why he must survive at all costs. Seeing everything that was happening, he couldn't believe it was a dream. It was all so real. He could feel the wind in his hair, even smell the blood. How could this be possible in a dream? The man's shout was louder and louder. "Parsons, I'll kill you with my own hands if you don't come to your senses." When he remembered the man, he realized that he was back in the same dream. Now that he was here, it was decided that I was no longer Cheol Ho Kang. I'm Parsons now. It was becoming more and more obvious by the minute that this wasn't a dream. There was no time to think about it. It was too dangerous, even if it was a dream. Whether it was a dream or not doesn't matter. The most important thing now is to survive. We can deal with the rest later. The hail of arrows never stopped. They were so sharp that they easily pierced the wooden shields of the allies. Few could survive a single arrow. Everyone who had time was hiding under the catapults. The arrows kept coming, but the warriors were unstoppable on their way to their goal. The wall of the fortress was only meters away. Those who had not had time to hide under the catapults raised their shields in the hope that they would save them. Parsons was one of those who didn't have time to hide under the catapult. Suddenly, he hears a shout, "Hey, rookie!" According to Parsons' memories, he's a sergeant in the military corps. Interesting. So he's possessing another man's memories? The sergeant, seeing that something is wrong with him, tells him, "As soon as we are ready to move out, don't hesitate. Forget fear and keep talking if you want to live." The sergeant's confidence boosted the morale of not only Parsons, but the entire troop. The army moved inexorably forward. Despite the terrible attacks of the enemy, the losses were minimal, but they were there. The sergeant's words had lifted Parsons' spirits. The plan was to get behind the wall with the siege tower and open the gate from the inside. This goal was quite achievable, as there were only a couple of steps left to the walls of the fortress. Victory was irreversible. According to the general's plan, once the infantry opens the gate to the fortress, the knights would attack. Inside the enemy fortress, panic was already brewing. They knew the end was near. Parsons' ineptitude was only one thing. Our group must try to survive until then. As suddenly, the sergeant's shout went up the troops into battle. "The assault is on!" But the sergeant didn't stop shouting. He kept raising the morale of his soldiers more and more. He was a master of his craft. Among the soldiers, he had great authority. A soldier in his army knew that he could turn to a sergeant for advice. "Your lives are in your hands. As soon as you retreat one step, arrows will pierce your backs." These words of the foolish sergeant are imprinted in the minds of the soldiers. The hatches of the siege tower have opened. The warriors marketed to fight without fear. It was Panson's turn, climbing out of the hatch, he thought. This already looks like some kind of war or worse. Pansons saw the full horror of war. Terror and fear seized his body and soul. What was to be done? Moments later, he was shot in the cheek. His face was covered in blood. If this is a dream, why does it hurt so much? This is what delay in battle can cost. Maybe this isn't a dream. But if I die here, what will happen to me? He finally figured it out. It wasn't even a dream. Everything around him was real. The battle was in full swing. The casualties of both sides were simply unreal. But the archers had no chance to put up against the infantry in close combat. Huge pools of blood turned into rivers. The death toll was rising at a colossal rate, but the soldiers fought for the right cause no matter what. Pansons, entering the battle, disarms the enemy with the first thrust of his spear. He realized it was either him or him. His mind was clear and his body was solid as a rock. He couldn't die here because he didn't even know what would happen to him if he died. Cold sweat was beading on his face, adrenaline in his blood, so much so that he could lift his horse. Pansons, brimming with confidence, lunged at an entire squad of the enemy, with only a spear. Predictably, his spear broke against the sturdy armor. He was terrified. What to do now? But there was no time to think. His spear was only able to penetrate the enemy's armor slightly before breaking. Brass armor was renowned for its durability. It took one swing of the scythe to knock the Panson's legs off. Before he could even hit the ground, his body began to bleed. Wow. What? Pansons did something unreal. With the last bit of strength he had left, he just pushed the giant off the wall. There's no other word for it than courage. Our hero only looked at the enemy, who flew from the wall like a stone. As he fell, he took down a dozen soldiers with him. Pansons, left surrounded by enemies. What will happen to him next? When he turned around, he shouted, "We have to kill that bastard!" There was nothing left of his old self. His mind was no longer on his work or his family. The only thing he wanted to do was to survive. Realizing that he remained surrounded, Pansons grabbed that giant scythe and waved it with all his might to scare off his enemies. Interesting. The enemy soldiers, seeing that Pansons was able to strike with a huge scythe without any problems. They were terrified, their faces showing force. Pansons was seized with a fury, sincere and inhuman. What was the end of him, he shouted. "One at a time, you creatures." He was able to stop the enemy for a while, just long enough to wait for help. The battle became even fiercer. The bodies of the dead fell from the wall. Panson's weapon was a scythe. It was his trophy. The sergeant entered the fray. He all but saw Pansons throw down an elite enemy warrior with his bare hands. "You're pretty good, rookie. Seriously, well done." Hearing a sergeant say that was more valuable than getting a medal. The gates were already open. It was time for the knights to engage. The infantrymen did a great job. The end of the battle was near. Pansons was on his legs, but he had accomplished the most important task of all. He had survived. Since the battle was over, there were a few things to think about. First of all, this isn't a dream. It's real. I can feel the pain of the arrow. Secondly, until I figure this out, I'm gonna have to stay a Parsons. A squad of soldiers broke into a luxury home. They just kicked in the doors. They really scared the girls who worked in the house. In the hall, there was a man in white clothes with a gold sash. He said to the soldiers, "You fools, you will answer for this. The house they broke into obviously belonged to a very important man." They decided to let the old man's words slip and cut his life short in cold blood. With the whole window open, they made their way deep into the mansion. The sergeant, with a satisfied look, laughing, says, "It was hard to penetrate the castle, but now you can enjoy the victory." During the battle, most of the city was destroyed. At the end of the battle, 450 men remained in the mercenary corps. 131 were killed. After hearing the report, the commander-in-chief made a speech to the troops. "Good work, soldiers. Today we have won a great victory. This earth no longer belongs to the evil Dorian. This is pure victory." The soldiers were just jubilant. Despite the losses, they survived. We won thanks to brave and honorable heroes. They fought for our goals. The general was overwhelmed with pride. Of the war, could not contain her joy. After all, they were the ones who had won this victory. The commander continued his speech. "I, Eldors, promise you that your feat will be remembered by all the exclamation points." A gray-haired man comes up to Pansons, puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "We lost a lot of people in this bloody battle, but I think this victory is very important for the people. We should not forget that any victory is earned with blood and human lives." This wasn't just a victory, it was a chance at life for all those people. They lost their homes a long time ago. For the last 30 years, they hadn't been traveling from one place to another, malnourished, sleep-deprived, many of them dying of disease, but that's about to change. Sometime later, the regular soldiers were brought before the general, and each of them was asked to introduce themselves. I wonder what this is for. Do they want to make some kind of personalized medals? First in line was Panson's. Without a second thought, he shouted, "Shun!" When he saw that everyone was silent except him, he was very embarrassed and thought, "Don't they understand the command? Why am I the only one who stands out like this?" The sergeant, who was standing in front of him, started waving his head from side to side as if to insinuate that he should keep quiet. After this gesture from the sergeant, he hesitantly continued, "I'm a Parsons, or more accurately, a Kangchul-ho. I would have to train for 24 months to achieve anything in the Korean army." Seeing him, the general shouted out, "There you are? You're the same Parsons, aren't you? It's amazing how the general knew the name of an ordinary common soldier. Something's obviously wrong here." Looking at the general, Parsons didn't know what to say. The last thing he wanted right now was contact with a stranger. The sergeant shouted, "Parsons, step forward!" Stepping forward, with his head held high, he says, "Yes, Your Grace. My name is Parsons, sir. Well, let's see where this takes us." Leaning closer to him, the general says, "I heard this is your first battle, but even so, you've managed to stand out among our fighters. Even though it's the nicest thing I've heard in my life, the reality is that people here are used as disposable tools, and those who don't agree to be one are threatened with death. It's not fair. After all, the others made no less contribution to the victory than he did, and someone gave even his life out." The general says, There is a vacancy among my entourage." Such words strained the plover very much, for he had devoted his whole life to war, and Parsons had fought only one battle. After some thought, the commander suggested that he become a knight. Only the smartest, strongest, and bravest warriors were accepted as knights. Their main task was to guard the king. Every soldier who devoted his life to war dreamed of becoming a knight under the king. Upon hearing his proposal, Pansence was horrified. To be a riding knight? That would be the same as being his personal slave, wouldn't it? Figuring out how to avoid it, the guy replied, "This position is too high for me, Your Majesty. Whew, I think I got away with it." Trying to save my skin from slavery, he comes up with 1,000 excuses. There must be a lot of other people applying for this job. It would be wrong to choose me. I apologize. But the king was smarter than him. He wanted to get him even more, so he said, "Ah, you have fine manners too. It would be unfair to keep you as a mercenary." Whoa, I guess showing manners wasn't necessary. Now, his politeness could cost him not just his freedom, but his life. Not letting the opportunity pass him by, he thought he could make a little extra money. It's worth a try. Smiling sweetly, he says, "Well, maybe you could just give me some silver, Chalky." Such insolence surprised the commander very much, and his face showed genuine bewilderment. He looked at the sergeant and asked, "Where did you find him?" Angry, the general says through gritted teeth, "Money? Do you only want money?" That's actually a very interesting question. Who doesn't need money? Of course, a man like him can't understand how much money changes the lives of ordinary people. Frightened for his life, Pansons became very nervous. His hands were sweating and his face was flushed, as if he had not died in the battle. He would die now. Pansons managed to save his life, probably because the king was angry that he refused to give up his knighthood and asked for money. As he leaves the crowd, he hears the general shouting, "There's nothing worse than this." As he walks through the crowd, he hears people saying to him, "You really pissed him off, didn't you? Be warned, you may not get a second chance." Such words of people around him depressed him a lot, because he did not know where he was and what was happening to him. A squire gets more than a sergeant, and nobody cares about the regular soldiers. But everyone can stab you in the back out of their own personal desires. The next morning, the soldiers came to receive their blood money. All were very badly tired and hungry. The battle had greatly exhausted them. Pansons, lost in his thoughts. He did not know what to expect next, payment or a knife in the back for his offense. Suddenly, the sergeant's voice brings him to his senses. "Today is payday. Make sure you pick up your reward before you go, boys. Next, Parsons. You've earned 108 gold coins. Count it, please." Apparently, they decided not to punish him for his misdemeanor. When he took the bag in his hands, he felt how heavy it was. He was greatly surprised. Is this really money? It was the first money he could make on his own, but it was money made by killing. Standing back and holding his belongings in his sack, he began to think about what to do next. He was so focused on surviving that he didn't even realize what had happened to him that night. He's decided that until I figure things out, I'm gonna live here as a Parsons. Here we go again. Everything around me began to vaporize in an incomprehensible way, turning into mere pixels. When everything disappeared, an inscription appeared in front of his eyes. Penalties in training mode will be calculated from the reward. 1% of the reward will be received. Commencing teleportation in the normal dimension. Please wait. Moments later, he's back in his room. Whoa, what was that? He couldn't think it was real. But you and I know it was more than real. Strangely, he remembered everything that had happened to him in the dream. Knowing that remembering dreams was impossible, he was horrified. Had I somehow gotten to the other dimension, where I'd been as a boy of 16? Touch your cheek where the scar was. He exhaled with relief, but that was pretty realistic. Suddenly, a pair of gold coins fell from the ceiling. Could this be the reward he received for the battle? But why so little? Is it really only 1%? Seeing the mere gold coins on the floor, he was at a loss for words. Was this issue he was going through real? And he sold his soul to get a job. Our job search site honestly trumps your earnings. It is created for people like you who are willing to sell their souls to find a job. We will endeavor to find the best job for you. We will consider all your talents and all your potential. All for you, dear customer. When he opened his wallet, he saw that there were a few bills in there. It's kind of weird because he didn't put them in there, but I honestly didn't have anything to put in there. When he looked at the money, he thought, I never thought I could make money this way. Real life is pretty harsh, and everyone tries to survive as best they can. He couldn't help thinking that that world was like the real one. It was impossible to distinguish truth from falsehood. Even the early days felt like the real thing. As he walked down the street, he thought, it's a good thing I got at least 1 coin from what I earned in the other world. He couldn't tell if it was a dream or real. Of course it was real. Wake up. You felt the pain and even the smells, so I actually killed those people. Now, that's a really interesting question. What happens to the people who died out there? Are they just not getting paid? Or are they actually, at the thought that he might actually have died? His hands began to tremble. He couldn't control them. Use the phone. I wonder who could be calling him since no one wants him. Could it be his sister? Taking the phone in his hands, he thought, who decided to call me at this hour? That's funny, Sos called. Sosa was the person who recommended the job search site. I wonder if he knows something. What happened to our hero? Not sure what to expect from this conversation, he thought for a long time whether to pick up the phone or just ignore his call. Determined to find out what Sose knew about that world, he decided to answer the call. The voice on the phone sounded more like an answering machine than the voice of a real person. After a few seconds of silence, he says, Good morning, Mr. Kang. I hope your day is going great. I'm sorry. But why the call? And how do you know my name? Do I really want to know? I mean, I've never seen him before in my life. Oh? You provided all your details when you registered on our website, sir. I was just wondering if you'd be able to meet with me today. Wow! Apparently they don't send useless spam. Kang, a little hesitantly, asked them, Why do you want to do this? To which he replied, We respect our customers very much and invite everyone to join us. Of course, you can refuse. In fact, I wonder what they will tell him when they meet him. But wouldn't you like to know more about yesterday? Apparently, this site is staffed by professionals who know how to bribe. When he got to their office, he saw that he needed office number 6F. Going to their office on the 6th floor, doubting whether it was worth coming here at all. Well, curiosity got the best of me. It's like he's making a deal with the devil, but he needs to find out what happened yesterday. Of course he needs to know. We're curious too. As soon as the elevator opened, he is greeted by a rather cute girl with pink hair and unrealistically huge eyes. Ha! If you get my drift. This girl didn't look like a devil at all. She smiled and greeted him. Seeing such a pretty girl in front of him, he was embarrassed. But don't forget his purpose for coming here. When he came to his senses, he asked, "This is Sose's office, right?" "Yeah." "Sure. Follow me to my appointment." God, this girl is so sweet and beautiful and kind. Apparently, perfect, no less. This girl's voice sounded like the voice from a cell phone. The plot begins to unravel. A nice conversation with a girl relaxed him. He looked much calmer. As they walk down the hall, he says to her, "You're much nicer than I thought you'd be." "Cuter?" "The guy, she's a firecracker." The girl took his words as a compliment. Her eyes shone and a blush appeared on her cheeks. She asked him, "Who did you expect to meet here?" "Someone like a demon." Khan, a little embarrassed. "I hope she can't read minds," he thought. His imagination is running wild. Maybe a demoness? You know, you could give your soul to a demoness like that. The girl says, "Oh gods, who in our world would wear one of these? It's not classy at all." How did she see his thoughts? "Oh!" The guy got really embarrassed. His face just turned red like a tomato. He says to her, "Wait, how?" The guy was shocked at how she did it, he thought. What's a real mind reader like? As suddenly as they have already arrived, the girl invites him to come into the office. The head of the company should be here in a couple of minutes to explain everything to you. Before she leaves, she tells him, "Oh, one more thing. The gold coin you earned was worth about 1,600,000 on the open market. The money you sold it for is a little low, isn't it? I guess they know all about their customers." Kang wasn't just surprised, he was discouraged. How do they even know how much I sold the coin for a few hours ago? Seeing the guy's genuine surprise, she tells him, "It wasn't hard, Mr. Khan. We can send people to other dimensions. Determining where you've been and how much you've sold something for is pretty easy." It finally came to him that this cute girl could read minds. He realized he was in over his head, but there was no turning back. The girl shoves him into the office and says, "Please, sit down in the chair. I'm trying to get out of here," and she says, "Wait a minute." Entering the office, he saw another beauty in front of him. Very business-like in appearance, and the same eyes. At first glance, never said she had any powers. We're all unusual in this office. When she sees him come into the office, she says to him, "Come on, come in, Mr. Khan, I'm waiting." When he saw her, he was like, wow. Even though she's a CEO, she's more like a celebrity. The girl got very embarrassed and says, "I think you overestimate me. Boy, you're in trouble. Everyone around you can read your mind." And then Kang remembers what his girlfriend told him when he entered the room. It's not hard to read your mind. Deciding not to waste time on words, the girl introduced herself. "My name is Woo Soon-hee. I am the site administrator and CEO of this company." "That doesn't mean I just sold my soul to the devil, does it? Are you stupid or what?" He just shook my hand. The girl seriously to me there says to him, "You're right." His face opened cold, then he says in a trembling voice, "So this was all real?" "In a way." "What's that supposed to mean?" Remembering the final splash page after getting the money. He says, "But everything that happened yesterday is just training. Considering you're only at level 1, that's all I can tell you. You might consider yesterday's events to have been a good experience for you. Wasn't yesterday's battle one of the easiest? I mean, he almost died there yesterday. What's going to happen next?" "You think he's being conned," he yells at her. "First level experience? What are you talking about? After calming down, he started asking logical questions. First of all, why me? Me what? Were you there by accident or what? On Miss Wu's face, a sly smile appeared. Do we look like a company that picks random people, Mr. Kang? Your best friend accumulated debts on your behalf, didn't he? After your mom went into the hospital, you were very upset. I wonder what that company does, how they know everything. Maybe they work for the government. We found you just at the height of your despair to help you. And indeed, his life was going downhill. Leaning over to him, Miss Wu says in a whisper, Don't you think you're feeling better, Mr. Khan? The words about his mom made Kang very angry. He slams his palm on the table and shouts, What do you want from me? His statement provoked all sorts of thoughts. Are they really going to deprive him of contact with his family? After waiting out his tantrum, Ms. Wu asks him to calm down. You couldn't tell from her look that she was a bad or evil person. Maybe they do want to help people like him. But the methods are questionable. Believe me, we're not going to take your family away from you. Oh, crap. She's a mind reader. You have to control your emotions as well as your thoughts. Then I'll ask again, Ms. Wu. What do you want me to do? Ms. Wu was so charming, but don't forget that she can read minds is probably not her only ability. Now I just want you to level up. He was surprised at such a request. So you want me to go to that world again? Ms. Wu says that's right. Levels? Training? Is it just like in games? It's very much like the behavior in the games. I wonder if his armor will get stronger as he levels up, or if there will be any special skills. Miss Wu, answered he. Yet we ourselves do not want you to wash your hands in blood. Miss Wu's words made him hesitate. His hands were already covered in blood. Trying to convince Kana to stay in the game, she offers him a reward of money and a level up if he can handle all the challenges along the way, just like in the games. After thinking about what she said, he asked her, So the contract I signed binds me to these rules. Guy, looks like you're walking into a trap. That really pissed Khan off. Trying to keep his emotions in check, he gritted his teeth and said, And I'm supposed to just follow your instructions? I don't even know who I'm contracting with. I don't even know what my customers' motives are. Why do I have to carry out such orders? Of course, it's a very strange job. It's unclear who does it and why, but nevertheless, the pay here was good enough. All this meaningless talk greatly bored Miss Wu. They're trying to protect Mr. Khan, not deceive him. It was in their best interest. Suddenly she gave out, a very interesting phrase. Too much information about sex can lead a child to watch adult movies. Well, from words to action. Like in the game, the first thing we had to do was create an avatar. Parallel worlds, divergent realities, people between dimensions. It's all an assignment for our clients. Ms. Wu turns to a guy. Tell me, do these things mean anything to you? What? It was the first time he'd ever heard those words, not that they meant anything to him. Young mercenary Parsons. Level F assignment. The lowest type of assignment. I wonder if it's something like helping a grandmother cross the street or picking a cat out of a tree. Suddenly, a voice from the void says, You have successfully completed the test. Your skills are excellent. You should remember that. Your skills have earned you the attention of the higher-ups. For that, you have received an additional reward. Were all the soldiers around him just ordinary people like him? While the upload was going on, Ms. Wu says to Khan, I think Parsons was glad for such a great chance. So far, it was all very hard to understand. He thought she was lying. Remembering the battle, he thinks, was it really true? And am I really? I'm trying to relax the guy. Miss Wu is joking. You seem serious. Although in the other world, you could do this kind of stuff. Her expression showed that she was very happy with the result. Although I think if you were frivolous, we would hardly have a contract. These words caused Kang to be deeply interested. How do they know if he's frivolous or not? I guess it's time to get used to them knowing everything. Probably the most satisfying thing for our client is receiving a reward after completing missions. You can see that Ms. Wu was not born yesterday. She knew exactly what leverage she had on everyone. But 1,600,000 won is only part of the reward. If you think about it that way, it's only 1% of his earnings. If he got 100%, he wouldn't have to work for a year. Other people become millionaires from lies and dirty deeds, and only you become a millionaire by doing a job. Of course, how much of this can be considered legitimate work is a big question. Remembering his first mission, he immediately asked a question. There are penalties, right? What happens if I fail the mission or die? Oh my God! We'll finally know what's going to happen. If you die in that dimension, like Cheol-ho in this one, you'll be safe and sound. I couldn't be happier with this news, but as for the money, it's still an open question. How suddenly he thought of it. Ms. Wu says, however, of course, there will always be some, however. We'd appreciate it if you wouldn't throw your life away left and right. We still have a lot of clients to look after. You don't want your life to change with other people's lives, do you? Wow, that's something you should have been warned about beforehand. Her words made Khan very wary, although it made sense. It wasn't worth the risk. Also, there will be a fine for failing a mission. Now that's bad news. So we have to win. The penalty was a downgrade. Well, it's not that bad, although it is not worth the risk, because the higher the level, the greater the reward. That's it, isn't it? He's already realized he's in trouble. At the end, Ms. Wu gives him her hand and says, "You'll get a reward for studying, right?" He kind of did, but he only got 1%, so it's not fair. Hearing that he got 1% surprised me greatly. How much is that at 100%? Thank God our hero was good at math. He quickly realized that it would be more than 100 million. Big risk, big reward. It's just a question of what you're willing to do for the money. Before leaving, Miss Wu reminded him that, at the end, the reward is given out strictly proportional to your level. The higher the level, the higher the reward. I think it makes sense to level up. Our high-level clients do whatever they want, as long as they don't lose a level. It seems that not only does a tier give you more income, it also gives you more privileges. Kang couldn't get the figure of 100 million won out of his head. He had never seen such money in his life, let alone held it in his hands. But now he has a real chance to become a millionaire. Wait, so you're saying I could make 100 million just by being a Parsons? It's amazing that you can make that much money even with tuition. Money, it's on the guy's mind. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But it's not that simple. Ms. Wu tells him to wait a second. Kana, of course, was not very happy that he would be making money this way. But the kind of money he was making here, he wouldn't make anywhere else legally. Who am I to decide people's fates for money? These thoughts were still lingering in Khan's mind. Suddenly Ms. Wu says, self-loathing doesn't help. Mr. Khan, of course, how could you forget she's a mind reader? Let's look at it this way. Parsons would have been grateful you got him home alive and well. Come to think of it, he didn't have a choice. It was him or him. Think about it. Ms. Wu knows how to manipulate people. Kong's not a killer, he was just saving his life. Think about it. Ms. Wu knows how to manipulate people. Kang's not a killer, he was just saving his life. It's a world where money decides everything. Money rules our world, and in that world, instinct rules everything. Deciding to push him even harder, Ms. Wu says, "It's your decision to kill someone else or give you up to death, isn't it?" I wonder what she's trying to accomplish this way. Giving him the illusion of choice, she says, "Of course you can refuse and go home. We won't force you." But she knew perfectly well that he would not refuse because he needs that money more than anyone else. After thinking it over, Kang decides he needs that money. "What do I have to do this time?" Kang asked. As teleportation suddenly begins, they can teleport him from anywhere and at any time. At last, she shouts to him, "You have to figure it out for yourself." After a brief boot up, Khan was already standing there in fancy knight's armor. Suddenly, a huge knight appears out of the void. He was clearly unfriendly. With his huge axe, he strikes. What the hell? I just got here. Where the hell did he come from? The force of his blow was so great that it left a crater the size of a small lake in the huge stone. His axe was 2 centimeters from the kana. He looked at it. I wonder who he is, and what does he want? What's going on here? God. Khan was a hair's breadth away from death. What was he going to do here? The giant had a smile from ear to ear on his face. Looking at him, he said, "You better focus, Sir Knight. You are caught in a trap. Or perhaps this giant is a friend?" Looking around, Khan saw a new arrow on the floor. An arrow? That's interesting how it got here. I heard a thud against the metal, and then this arrow. Oh, so that's what this is all about. That giant just saved him because those arrows were poisoned. You have to be even more careful here than in the first trial. Oh, so that's what this is all about. That giant just saved him because those arrows were poisoned. You have to be even more careful here than in the first trial. Oh, so that's what this is all about. That giant just saved him because those arrows were poisoned. You have to be even more careful here than in the first trial. So that's the name of this giant. Sam Pat. I think it's a name worth remembering. Bam! Just as a huge rock fell from the ceiling. It was a classic trap. I'm surprised a warrior as skilled as Sampath fell for it. Mercenary. Sampath. I think I'm starting to realize something. The man saved me. Even so, Khan should still be careful with them, to help me find something. I'm here to find. I wonder who he's looking for. Suddenly, a game interface appears in front of him. It starts to look more and more like a game. In one of the boxes, it said, Yurival Pilchon, 24 years old. It's a little easier to get some information. A task appeared in the neighboring window. He had to explore the labyrinth to find the son of Count Raleigh is Leopold and Cana. That surprised the windows with the information a lot. But on the other hand, it was at least clear what needed to be done. It's all so much like a game, isn't it? But it's the damn woman. That thought was still lingering in Khan's mind. The cave he was in now was full of trap. He was carrying a shield and a huge sword. Apparently, there are not only traps in the caves, but also all sorts of evil things. That's when he remembers Ms. Wu's words. When you go to another world, you play along with everything that happens. But at the same time, be yourself, and remember the mission, even if everything going on around you seems like a mystery. Maybe her words did make some sense. Things will have to be figured out. You should try to preserve your life and personal qualities. That was the best advice, because there was no telling if Khan would be unharmed in his world if something happened to him in this one. Not according to her. But she doesn't seem trustworthy. What if I have to take someone's life this time? Maybe we shouldn't kill anyone, but to take that risk. Then what should he do? What if it will ensure the fulfillment of the mission? Maybe it was worth a little more thought before agreeing to such a contract. But still, money. It was money that could solve all his problems. He could pay for his mother's medical treatment, give his sister the decent life she deserved, and make his father proud of him. The smile was gone from his face. No, he had already agreed. There's no turning back. What's up? It's time for the mission. Hey, Juraval, are you okay? What are you, sleepy? It's a Sampath joke. Yes, I have to do what I have to do for my family. Kana's confidence was unmatched. Gathering his courage, he decides to go only forward to accomplish the mission. In order to accomplish the mission, you must clear your mind, forget what was in that world. It's all about family. I wonder what trials and difficulties await him ahead. A little bit of Juraval's history. He was part of a family of knights. Since his birth, he has worked hard to become a strong and brave warrior like his father. Our environment affects who we become later in life. But one day, his life changed dramatically. After his mother was shot by bandits, he lost the meaning of life. After his mother's death, his father drank all day long, his soul broken with grief. Jurival tried with all his might to stop his father, for he was a great knight here. He didn't want his father to ruin his life like that. On top of that, his sister was completely weakened after a serious illness. He didn't know how to save her. It's a pretty interesting situation. All the characters that he's entering in this world have the same values as Yi Kong. The responsibility for his family fell on young Jurival's shoulders. Only he could save his family. Without his mind, he joined all sorts of wars. It was all to get some money for his family. However, all of his accomplishments were somehow stolen by others. All his feats were not properly appreciated. The tech cop he'd earned wasn't enough to save the pit's financial life. He kept himself up nights on end, thinking his folks didn't deserve it, and that it was his fault. He's lost any hope of a brighter future. Is it over? And in that moment, hope shone right in front of him. It was a chance for a decent life. The king was in trouble. His son had not returned from the dark caves. They were known for their danger and unpredictability. The king, looking for warriors who dare to go there. The prince's thirst for adventure led him to the labyrinth. He hasn't been heard from in over a week. Jurival was the king's last hope. He asked him, "Can you bring him back here?" To be honest, few people return from these labyrinths, but the king is paying a lot of money for his son, so the risk is justified. If the king has given this task to Jurival, then he is obligated to fulfill this mission. The young warrior realized that this was his one chance he had been waiting for. He couldn't believe his luck. He would finally be able to do something for his family. Thanks to the reward, his sister will be able to recover quickly, and his father will be able to stop drinking. Jurival promised the king that he would bring his son back safe and sound. All his sleepless nights and sincere faith in a bright future were not in vain. A group of sampaths, together with Jurival, walked the labyrinth all day, but found nothing. Being very tired, they decided to make a halt for the night, sleep and rest, and tomorrow, with new strength, to start searching again. It had been about 5 hours since they had made the halt. All around them were sleeping like dead people, except for Jurival. He couldn't sleep. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't sleep. All those memories came flooding back to him like an avalanche. He had to complete this mission, and the sooner the better. Khan already knew pretty much everything about Jurival and his life. He just needed to sleep. The lack of sleep was making him very unwell. It could affect the mission very much, and not for the better. It was nearing dawn. But he still couldn't sleep. At that moment, it seemed to him that thoughts were one of the ways of torture. The resemblance between Parsons and Jurival was impossible to miss. The situation in the family is identical. The father is a heel. The sister is very ill. But what is more interesting is that Jurival is ready to do anything to save the family. Maybe it's all on purpose. Maybe it's because he'd do anything for his family too. I mean, the resemblance between the two of them is uncanny. Thinking about it, he recalls Miss Wu's words, "Whenever possible, we choose worlds for everyone, individually for everyone." It felt like they were reminding him of his helplessness. He sat awake all night with these thoughts. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound, like a crunch from behind him. Realizing where he was, he immediately grabbed his sword. After a bit of listening, he realizes that the sound is similar to the sounds of battle, and if he can hear them, someone is nearby. When he turned around, he noticed that the Pizel was gone. He could not be alone in this dark and gloomy labyrinth filled with danger and terror. Realizing that the Pizel may be in danger, Jurival shouts to the entire camp, "Wake up!" Every second counted now. Suddenly, a vicious orc with a huge sword in his hand jumped out of the darkness. Fortunately, he had excellent skills thanks to his training. The eyes of this monster were glowing with bright red fire. It was as if someone had cast a spell on him. Swinging around, he stabbed him with all his might with his spear. With his first blow, he threw the orc 10 meters away. but two more came from behind. Good thing he spotted them in time. It was enough, literally one swing of the spear, to repel the attack of two orcs at once. As soon as he dealt with them, he felt the ground shake. Behind him stood a huge orc. He was so huge that his one arm was bigger than a man. The situation was very difficult, nerves on edge. He turned to see his eyes and was simply horrified. How could anyone ever reach that size?